This holiday at T-Mobile, it's not about how far apart we are. It's about how close we can be. So we're bringing out our best deal. Right now, get the iPhone 12 on us on every single plan with eligible iPhone trade-in.
Cool. So I can FaceTime with my sister in Savannah.
That's right. The iPhone 12 on us on every plan on America's largest 5G network. It's time to holiday on with T-Mobile.
With 30 monthly bill credits plus tax. If you cancel credit, stop, and balance on required finance agreement may be due. Contact us for well-qualified buyers. Qualifying consumer plan required. See coverage and offer details at T-Mobile.com.
Hello listeners, I'm your speaker Casey, and welcome to this week's episode of the Cult Vault. Merry Christmas to you all. I hope you've all managed to have a wonderful time and filled your bellies to the maximum. This week marks the fourth and final instalment of December's troubled teen industry coverage. I've been overwhelmed by the amount of people who have reached out asking to share their own stories from time spent in these places. It is my hope to revisit this area further on in the year so people have this chance to be heard. This week I speak with Charlotte, who graduated from the Monarch School in 2016. It was a privilege to not only hear her story but to also discuss ways in which the justice for troubled teen victims can continue to progress. Hi Charlotte, and welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes, I'm excited to chat as well because we've been emailing backwards and forwards for a while trying to get a date fixed, and now here we are. And you're going to be rounding up our series on the troubled teen industry that we are trying to expose a bit more of throughout December. So would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yes, my name is Charlotte. I am located in the United States. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. And I entered the troubled teen industry in about December of 2014, and I left in August of 2016.
Okay, and when you say that you were a part of the troubled teen industry, was there a specific part that you were a member of, or a resident of, or ex-student?
Yes, so I went to a wilderness program in December of 2014 until about February of 2015. So I went to Pacific Quest Wilderness in Hawaii, and I was, I guess you could say I was a student there, and I partook in their therapeutic program for about 2 to 3 months. And then the program I went to afterwards, I was also a student in the therapeutic program.
Right. So did you go straight from Pacific Quest over to the other program that you stayed in until August 2016?
Yes, I went from Pacific Quest Wilderness I directly went to the Monarch School in Heron, Montana, and that was a therapeutic boarding school. Okay,
so are those two schools affiliated with one another?
I don't believe so, but I know that a lot of the students at Monarch came from wilderness programs all over the world. So a lot of the students had previously been in treatment or in inpatient hospitals.
Right. Okay. A lot of the people I've interviewed that have been involved in these types of institutions, mostly throughout America, have been sort of pre-2010. So I suppose in talking to you, you've had a slightly more recent experience. 2016 was only 4 years ago, even though after this year it feels like it was a lot longer ago than that.
Yes, absolutely.
But it's going to be interesting, I think, for myself and the listeners to get a perspective of somebody who's kind of been through this and had these experiences more recently. So do you recall why you were sent originally to Pacific Quest in 2014?
Yes, I struggled with depression and anxiety, which is super common. And I had a learning disability, and I started coping unhealthily because I wasn't properly medicated, I believe, looking back. And I was a danger to myself. and my parents didn't know how to help me. So they had either a case manager or a social worker find a program for me to go to. And they pretty much just got to the point where they had to pull me out of school, and they put me in an inpatient hospital for roughly 2 weeks before they sent me to my program.
Right. Okay. And do you recall them having a conversation with you about their decision to send you to that first program?
I knew that they were in the works, kind of figuring out what they wanted to do. And I kind of had a feeling that it was going to get to the point where I wasn't going to be at home anymore. And I'm grateful that they didn't have someone take me from my house, because I know that a lot of other kids were, they hired someone to come in the middle of the night and take them to programs. But my parents kind of saw that I was in a very depressed state where I was not really able to do much. So they kind of just woke me up one day and told me, like, we're going to hop on a plane and we're going to drop you off at a program. And I was just kind of okay with it, I guess.
So your frame of mind at that time is sort of, do you think you were maybe a bit foggy about all of the ways you felt specifically at that time?
Yeah, I definitely wasn't asked about it. I kind of was just grateful I was so depressed and very suicidal. So at that point, anything was better than being where I was. And I knew I just didn't want to be at home anymore. I needed like help, and all of us knew it. So I kind of just went with whatever was happening. And it was just, yeah, looking back, it was a very foggy few weeks.
And you were there for 3 months in total. So do you have a recollection of sort of arriving at this place, your time spent there, and then leaving to come back to the where you attended the Monarch School?
Are you speaking of Pacific Quest specifically? Or?
Yeah.
Pacific Quest, I know that programs, the dynamic can change over time. So a lot of people have good and bad experiences. But for me, I think Pacific Quest was actually very beneficial. I was able to kind of change medications. I was outside a lot, and I did some therapy, and I guess I learned how to take better care of myself, nutrition wise, being outside wise, and I was still figuring out myself. So I feel like that was kind of more of a freeing experience for me, just to be in a different environment.
I mean, it was over in Hawaii, so was it absolutely beautiful there as well?
Oh yeah, I mean, it was the most beautiful view. We were staying kind of, I don't want to say in the mountains, but we were kind of on a hillside in a more rural area. So we were very isolated, but we had beds, they had bunks for us to sleep in, which is, compared to other wilderness programs, is a luxury. People actually called Pacific Quest Princess Quest, because it was the more we had porta potties, and we had
glamping.
Yeah, exactly. It was like glamping. But a lot of the therapy was more horticultural based, so planting and growing our own food. So our diet was really good. No processed foods or anything. So I was nutritionally, I was very nourished, and I was really healthy. Yeah. And I think that was why it was so good for me, from what I can recall, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, 3 months is not too long of a period of time to be away from family and things that are familiar, I suppose, as if you're being so enriched in a healthy way. And, with conditions like depression and anxiety, it's often taking those first steps in self-care that are the most difficult, and finding a time and place for you to put yourself in positions that you wouldn't usually. So, if you're being put in a position where you're asked to be outside, asked to join in with things like horticulture, which at home, you might have just resorted to, the couch or your bed, or places where, you could withdraw from other people and family and friends. It sounds like a healthier way of encouraging people into situations they wouldn't normally, which is not something I've heard particularly around the troubled teen industry so far, which is why I'm thinking that your experience at the Monarch School might have been slightly different.
Oh, absolutely. The Monarch School was a whole different world. I mean, I don't even know where to start with.
Yeah, so did you you went straight from Pacific Quest to the Monarch School? Did your parents come and pick you up and take you there?
No. Okay, yeah, now it's coming back to me. So they transported me from Big Island to, I think I flew into Washington, and then I had this long drive into Heron, which the Monarch School is kind of in between Idaho and Montana. So I don't remember what time zone it was, but we were like an hour from the nearest town. So we were really isolated. Like if someone tried to run away, you know, they couldn't get very far because there was no towns nearby. So it's a pretty long drive, and it was a long trip from what I can recall.
And once you arrive there, and you know, you are you expecting it to be similar to the program that you've just completed?
So no one really told me. I knew that I wasn't going to go home, but they told me you're going to boarding school. So I was like kind of excited. You know, I was like, oh, like maybe I'll meet more people and be more normal. And it was their brochure to my parents had, you know, kids going on trips and doing fun things outside and laughing. And so I kind of, when I got there, that's kind of the image that they had given me about the place. So I was optimistic going into it.
And did you know, when you arrived and you saw sort of what the building looked like, did it remind you of like a typical boarding school?
So all the roads were like gravel roads. So it looked like a ranch almost. So you drove down the gravel road. There was a barn, and then there was like a small building, and then the main building, which was like a lodge kind of look. And it was all really plain looking to me. It was all like cabin looking, farm barn kind of aesthetic.
Okay. And you've rolled up to this place, and it's, you know, it's looking a bit like a ranch. What are your first encounters or experiences that make you realize that maybe this experience is going to be different from where you've just been?
Well, coming from a program where I was wearing generic Hanes clothing and using a porta potty, like the standards of living were really low for me. So I was like, I'm going to get a shower. I'm going to wear like regular clothes. I'm going to, you know, I didn't really know. I was like, I'm going to meet people and have fun. And I really just, that was so ingrained in my head that I couldn't like get past that to where I was like, this might be different. I was just like hoping for the best, that it would be something more normal. That's really all I can say about it.
Yeah. And when you start to take part in some of the curriculum, or I wouldn't even know what word to use, within the school or within the program, how is that? Is it different from the horticulture side of things? Are they using different therapy techniques? What is it that makes this place something that would fit within the troubled teen industry framework?
So I think that when you look at a program, it's kind of tough to answer that question because these programs are trying to integrate usually high school curriculum and a therapeutic aspect. And I think that can be really challenging. I'm not an expert on that part of it, but I mean, if you look at an inpatient hospital, that's going to be like a place where people go to get therapy. And when you look at a wilderness program, that's usually the same concept. But when you look at therapeutic schools, there's lots of wiggle room to adjust.
Yeah, it's strange though, isn't it? Because it's pitched as a boarding school, but it's difficult, as you said, to balance the therapy side of it with the education. So there has to be one aspect of it that's focused on more than the other. So would you say that your education suffered in place for you to obtain some type of therapy, or was the therapy put on the back end so that your education could be at the forefront?
Well, I think they kind of pitched it as a school, like a come take your kid to high school and have therapy on the side,
Right.
which is kind of what was pitched to my parents. And it's ideal when you look at it from a parent perspective. But I think that the therapeutic, I don't know what model they were using with therapeutic work, but I know that overtook everyday lifestyle all the way down to how you were acting and everyday behavior, what you were wearing, your routine. Everything was based around these strict rules. And Monarch actually called them the agreements. So they had like this list of agreements, and all the way down to how you spaced your hangers on the clothing rack. We had to space the hangers a fingertip length apart, and we could only have like one blanket and like a few pillows and a few personal items, but they would go through all of our belongings, and we had to wear, certain things on certain days. So that was really the discipline, was also kind of ingrained with the therapy, and that completely overtook any the academic work. Mm-hmm. And they actually, at one point in my stay, they pulled me from my classes while I was on punishment, and I couldn't go to school for 2 weeks, or I think it was 2 months. And I was on punishment, which I can discuss when you ask me another question, but I wasn't allowed to go to class, and I just kind of had to miss out on that part of my academics, I guess.
So sometimes the discipline took the shape of actually withdrawing completely your any type of formal education.
I think it was super subjective, like a person-to-person basis, but right. At certain points for certain people, that definitely could have been the case.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned earlier on at the start of the interview as well that you were struggling with, learning disability. It's almost so difficult, the position that your parents must have been put in, because they thought they were sending you somewhere where you would be obtaining a full education, which is something that you obviously needed the support with, and they thought maybe you'd be in a place where you'd be able to receive that support with your formal education, not realizing that when you got there, one of the punishments they would give to you would be to stop your education altogether. So what happens in that time when you're supposed to be in classes? Are you to take up more therapy, or are you what does that look like when you have that extra time?
So when you go to Monarch, you're assigned a therapist for your stay, and that person like overlooks your therapeutic work and does one-on-one therapy with you and stuff like that. So that person is really the one who organizes your work that you're doing in therapy. There's a lot of things that happen there.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely going to get into it as well. But you mentioned that you were on a punishment, and how did you come to be taken out of your class and put on this punishment?
So when you go to Monarch, they sit you down and they try to ease it onto you about the agreements. So they basically told me like the 3 rules we have here are the 3 agreements. No sexual contact and like romantic relationships, no drugs and alcohol, and no violence. So those were like the 3 big agreements. And if you broke those, you get punished to the full extent that they would punish you. And then there were sub agreements, and that's where it gets kind of hazy. And that's kind of where I believe the program went downhill, is that a lot of the staff members would see something happening and they would say, you're out of agreement. And then they would, somehow give you a smaller version of a punishment. But it was very subjective. But how I ended up on a seat, so I had a romantic involvement with a student, and it's a very small school. So eventually one of the teachers found out, and the thing that they do at Monarch is the lodge has wooden benches across one half of the room, and they'll sit you down on one of the benches and they'll give you a yellow notepad. And when someone sees the yellow notepad coming out, it's like that person's out of trouble. So that's like the out of agreement pad. And basically they sit you down and they just like don't really say anything. And you're supposed to write down out of agreement things that you've done.
Oh my goodness, that's so stressful.
Yeah, it was really scary. I mean, it happened a lot, but for me, I was in agreement a lot of the time because I was trying to behave. But I think when I broke one of the major agreements, it was like really scary for me because I knew I was like doing a bad thing according to their rules. But at the same time, I really liked this guy, and I was like,
yeah, I mean, what age were you roughly as well?
I think I was 17, maybe.
I mean, you're away from home, you're in this place, you're really isolated, away from friends and family and things that are familiar. And, a nice guy catches your eye and, you might have a little kiss or here and there. And that's completely natural at that age, isn't it? Hormones are absolutely raging at that period of people's lives. Yeah. And I mean, I guess because you'd had that encounter with him that you knew what you were out of agreement for. But there must be times where people aren't even sure what they've done and they have to list everything they could have possibly done. And I'd be sitting there thinking, oh no, I had an extra slice of bread with my dinner, or oh, I took that can of Coke back to my room with me. And it must be like absolutely terrifying for people who have been like, I don't know, when people like snitch on you and you're like, well, I know I've been snitched on, but I don't know what for. So I just have to write everything I've done in this notepad and hope that the punishment isn't too severe.
And I just remembered this, but you actually have to write down things that other people have done out of agreement. It's basically a notepad where you have to write everything you know. And I had written down that I knew that other students were out of agreement in romantic relationships, and I ended up getting other students in big trouble because I had said something, and it was just the worst feeling like I had snitched on people. Mm-hmm. And that was also part of the power dynamic at Monarch. The more that you told the staff or the counselors, like not the therapists themselves, but the people who watch us all the time, the more that you told them, the better you looked and the more power you had to advance in the program, because you were being a quote unquote leader and a team player.
That's difficult as well, isn't it? Because where the staff may be treating the residents unfairly, you're all more worried about each other and what other people in your dorm or what other people, in your peer group could be seeing or saying to the staff than you are about how the staff are treating you. So it's almost like they use you all to keep an eye on each other instead of Absolutely. You all keeping an eye on the staff.
100%. And something I wanted to touch on going along with that, with the power dynamic aspect, was I don't know the details of all of the staff's background, and there were some really great people as staff, like very kind, very courteous and caring about us. But it was almost as if, I don't know what the business side looked like, but a lot of these staff were not trained, and it was very clear that they did not know how to handle certain situations, and they would grab one of the older students to come calm someone else down, or, we had students responsible for, watching the girls in the dorm and making sure no one's hurting themselves. And if someone is, that person's a support. And I mean, there's two fronts to that, because the younger student or the person who's new into the program isn't very farly advanced in their therapeutic work. That person needs more assistance than they've been getting. Mm-hmm. And the older student, they can't focus on themselves, on their work. And it also might be triggering to them to have to take on that extra responsibility, which I found the level of stress and anxiety I had because of that was just, it was a lot.
Yeah, it sounds like a huge responsibility for somebody that's obviously trying to work on themselves at the same time, especially if you are assigned to a younger person who is incredibly homesick and feels really isolated and is having a difficult time adjusting to the program, and finding their own way, and to have all of your own problems and then almost be a second therapist or counselor to that other person must be a huge, huge responsibility.
Yes. And it got to the point where people, how do I say this? So when you first get there, you have a older sister, older brother, and, it makes that student look good to be able to be a leader and be a helper. But it is a responsibility. And once you're kind of settled in, that wears off a little bit. But a lot of very intense situations started happening further along in my stay. And the staff would just grab the students they thought were more capable of handling the situation. And we're talking people slitting their wrists in the bathroom stall and running around, having a manic episode, or walking down the road trying to run away. Really severe things were happening, and we all had to kind of witness that and, take part in that. And it's not to say that I wouldn't do that because I cared about that person, but it was very recurrent.
Right. So it's things that keep happening over and over, and the staff are clearly not trained or qualified in a professional capacity to deal with these situations. And you mentioned that if you were to come across somebody who was self-harming or having an episode or trying to run away and potentially putting themselves in some type of danger, then of course, as any good person, you would take a moment to try and be with that person. But you are still you're still not even an adult yourself. You're not classed as a legal adult at this time, and that responsibility is being put on you when there should be staff there who are trained to deal with those situations, or some type of policy and procedure in place to bring other people in who are qualified to deal with it if the staff on site are not.
Yes. I think that I really need to explain the dynamic of therapists. And
yes,
I really think that's important, because the therapists would have individual sessions with us and they would see us, but they weren't there all the time. So right. It's not really on them. And I really want to stress that, because I think the therapists did the best that they could.
Okay.
I think that, they were just trying to do what they were told by Patrick and Michelle, who own the school. And they were just trying to provide us the best care that they could, but they went home to their families.
Yeah.
And the staff and the counselors were with us more often, walking with us, sitting with us. It got to a point where they were locking us in and out of the dorms because, it got really restrictive, and they were the ones that were overworked, but also took part in some of that power dynamic that led to a downward slide in the program. I would say.
So it's more the round the clock staff who are there sort of day in, day out, who are on site pretty regularly, as opposed to the therapists. It's the staff that are the ones who were calling on other residents to help them kind of fulfill their duties.
I would say so, but it's hard because, you know, we would have groups as well, and a lot of things that happen in group, the therapists were overseeing as well. And I think that the therapists had the power to be able to stop some things from happening, but they didn't. And that's also kind of an aspect that, you know, how responsible are you if you don't stop something from happening? But also you can't be there all the time. So I don't know what level of responsibility would fall on the therapist, but I know that my experience with the therapist was positive overall.
When you talk about group therapy or group work, what does that look like overall?
So I don't remember how many groups we had a week. I think we had school 3 days a week, and we had work days mixed in with therapy two days a week, maybe. I don't really remember, but I think so. I remember there's a request group. So they'll throw groups together with a few therapists, and basically those groups are mixed in with people who request to speak to someone in therapy.
Okay.
And basically that person will either slander the other person verbally, or if they're on bans from that person, have an opportunity to speak to them, or whatever other reason. If you have an issue with the student, that's the place to do it. And I feel like those groups turned into, you know, students yelling at each other, snitching on each other, attacking each other, because, you know, again, that power dynamic, they want to make themselves look good. I don't think anyone really wanted to hurt each other. I think it just turned into that because of, you know, they wanted to advance in the program and they wanted to go home. So
do you remember there being a progression of your group therapy sessions going from sort of sitting and chatting to just going in expecting there to be screaming and shouting at each other?
Yes, absolutely. 100%.
And were you ever approached in one of these sessions by one of your peers?
I'm certain that's happened. I can't really recall. I think it's happened a few times actually. But I think that some people use it as an opportunity to slander another person, to make them look bad, because it got to the point where, you know, someone would judge you on your actions or your demeanor, and they could point that out and say, you're not doing your therapeutic work, you're flirting with that boy, or you broke bands with that person, or you're not being a leader. And they'll turn that into, you're not doing your therapeutic work, to pretend to kind of hold you accountable, when really they're just trying to look good and look like they're doing, you know, they're being helpful, and they just really want to slander you. And I don't think it's like a malintent thing. I think it was really just because they were scared and they wanted to go home. And I've been in that position, and I absolutely 100% did that. I will take accountability. I was really scared and I wanted to look good. So of course I did that.
And I mean, was it always a one-on-one shouting match, or were there ever instances of just everybody shouting at everybody?
I think the therapist like tried to intervene when it got, you know, too many people talking. But there were definitely hostile groups where many people had things to say to one another. It almost seemed like a petty things started becoming turned into things that were not relevant to someone's therapeutic process.
Yeah, I could see how that could happen though, in environments where you're so closely monitored and so severely disciplined, that it could just be that if somebody uses somebody else's soap, that's a very big deal in a place where, you know, not when, not that not too much is happening, but it's very it's very separate from typical life, isn't it? It's very, you know, that soap is your possession, and it's one of the few things that you have. So I'm just using this as an example of something. But if somebody was to take one of your possessions and use that without your permission, I could see why that would be turned into something bigger in that environment than it would be in sort of our daily lives now.
Yeah, we weren't supposed to share things anyway. Like, we weren't allowed to share clothes. But I mean, most students did it anyway, but it was things like that. Like, you're absolutely right, because there were some people who struggled with kleptomania. There were some people who struggled with stealing things and had an actual disorder, and they just tried to keep it very by the book. And I feel like that's also something that could have been damaging to some people as well.
Yeah, I think it's those types of things where somebody has a specific condition. It's almost like there needs to be a level of education within the residents, you know, almost being given short lessons on what some of the conditions are for the people that they are surrounded by, so that there can be a level of understanding, empathy, sympathy, and a level of support and connection that you can't get if you don't understand somebody's condition, which must be so isolating. I mean, even you and yourself with your conditions at some points probably felt isolated, or, you know, or different from the rest of your peer group, which must be even more difficult when you're already away from home.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't really remember times where I felt necessarily different, because I knew that a lot of the people there had depression. A lot of the people there had, you know, issues with their family, and it was almost a bonding experience to talk to other kids who had gone to wilderness programs, but it also was desensitizing these illnesses. Even now, I can talk about mental illness with a straight face, because I lived around people who were so mentally ill, and I could talk about my own trauma and my daily struggles without, you know, batting an eyelash, because they would make us talk about our problems all the time, and they would make it such in our face, to the point where if I saw someone hurting themselves, it's not that I didn't feel anything, but I was like, oh, like there it goes again, like someone's hurting themselves or someone's having an episode. And it's like, you get so used to it that you're so desensitized. So it was, I guess also that contributes to the people telling on each other and, you know, shaming other people for struggling, because I mean, it's not new. And it almost like made people frustrated and tired, because, you know, they wanted to move on, I guess.
Was there like medicated students that were having sort of medications prescribed to them, or change of medication throughout?
Pretty much. I think a majority of the students were on medications. So we had like a little office to get our medicine and everything. So, you know, as long as you got in line at a certain point and got your medicine before class, then it was pretty normal to see people go get medications.
It's just interesting, because I know in the earlier years of some of the troubled teen programs, they were not always open to residents who required medication. and then it just became such a regular thing, and now you're talking about it like, well, yeah, you know, most of us when we were there, you know, we were on medication. Yeah. So it kind of, you can see how the pattern kind of was formed throughout the years, which I think is quite interesting. Do you have any notable memories or experiences specifically from your time at Monarch School that come back to you occasionally, or things that you find yourself reflecting on that happened while you were there?
I think that I've made my peace with the memories, but I'm still struggling with how it affected me on, you know, on how that affects me emotionally and mentally, and how it's shaped my relationships and adjusting to certain situations. I think that like a lot of the things that have happened, you know, they just happened and I've moved on from it. But I also know that, you know, the PTSD and the, you know, struggling with authority figures, struggling with relationships, feeling shame and guilt. Those are all things that I've been working on, because I know that that lasts longer than a memory would, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, some people I'm speaking to who have engaged in programs like these, you know, many years before you did, are some of those people are only now starting their journeys of realizing what you've just said, you know, you've been working on and moving on from. So I think that's really inspiring. I think that's such a positive outlook to have. And it's got to be encouraging for anybody else that's had these experiences that's listening now, to know that, you know, you can have that mindset where, you know, all of these things that come from being involved in something like this, you know, not finding it hard to trust, oversharing information, relationships being difficult, you know, all the signs of things that come from even just cult like controlled environments. Yeah, it's really good. I mean, are you attending any type of therapy now, or are you sort of working on this on your own? Is there anyone you've sought out for support?
So my parents, I'm so lucky because my parents have been supporting me through my therapy. So the past year, I've been seeing a therapist and been doing EMDR work for PTSD, which has helped me. It has completely changed my life. It's so incredible, and I'm just like so lucky. And I also have a psychotherapist who I see occasionally, just to talk through things. And you know, I'm on the proper medication, and I'm just really grateful, and I feel like a lot has changed because I can have access to the proper treatment. And I think that therapy is just so important, even if you don't struggle with like a severe disorder. Even if you just want to talk to somebody, therapy is just, there's no harm done in seeing a psychotherapist or reaching out for help.
No, I think that's great. I mean, you left the Monarch School in 2016. We're in 2020, and in those 4 years, it sounds like you've had such a healing journey and learned a lot about yourself as well. So it's great to be able to speak to somebody who is already in that place where they can say, you know, therapy is great, therapy works, it's worked for me, these are the steps I've taken. Because a lot of the time the people I speak to are, you know, currently involved in therapy and seeing how it's going and getting a feeling for it and working things out. So it's really nice to hear that you still have such a close relationship with your parents as well, because I know that's not always the case for a lot of people that have been involved in the troubled teen industry.
So my parents and my family is, you know, we love each other no matter what. We support each other no matter what. And I think that now that, the breaking code silence movement has come to light,
Mm-hmm.
which I fully support, by the way. I think that my parents, we just don't really talk about Monarch. I don't really express how I feel about the experience to them. And I think that's just one thing that a lot of my friends' parents from Monarch as well have said, that their parents don't really like talking about it, because I think the things that we would tell our parents, they didn't really believe, or they didn't want to admit to themselves were actually happening. So that's like one thing that I still struggle with my family is, kind of approaching that topic. So, I mean,
Are they aware of the movement as themselves as well? Do you think maybe they've done some independent research?
I think they've looked into it, but I haven't really tried having a conversation about it.
Yeah. It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because I truly believe that most of the parents thought they were doing the right thing and had no other choice, or thought it was the best decision for, the majority of the children that are put through these programs. The most important thing to think about now is how these places are still functioning in the same way that the Monarch School was functioning while you were there, with ill-equipped, underqualified, or staff with zero qualifications, rap sessions and screaming matches and stress positions, and these parts of these programs are still active in programs today. And that's what we have to hope to kind of bring to light through these discussions through things like the break and code silence movement. We have to hope that there has to be some light shed on the programs that are still active today, even ones that get shut down through the courts and then just open up under a different name. There has to be some level of whistleblowing that makes a difference.
Yeah, I just really wish that, Paris Hilton's a celebrity, but she's not a politician. She can't change policy, but she can influence the people who do. And it's hard because this is child abuse at an institutional level. And
yes,
it's so utterly wrong. And it's been going on for a very long time. And a lot of these programs base their, the way that they do their therapy and they, structure their programs on behavior modification, which is back in the 1960s, which was extremely violent. And no one wants to admit that to themselves, that like, wow, like how can someone, base their therapy on something that awful? And
all through the use of LSD and all types of mind altering, thought altering substances that they were using at that time as well. And adults who were consenting to things like rap sessions and emotional growth, I say in inverted commas, emotional growth, whether they ended up indoctrinated or brainwashed after spending time within these types of groups is another discussion completely. But at first, consenting, willing adults who, can have a legal say over where they're sent and where they spend time. We're talking about children who don't have those choices, who don't have those rights, who have their freedom taken away from them, decisions made for them, and billions of dollars made on the backs of institutionalized child abuse.
It's honestly heartbreaking, and it's a cycle, because with Monarch specifically, the man who owned the school, he went to Rocky Mountain Academy when in his teens, and the program was a CEDU school, which is CEDU is based off of the Synanon cult in the 1960s. So he went to a program based on CEDU principles, and then he went on to open Monarch. And I know that a lot of Monarchs discipline, although some of it wasn't as severe as cult specific, shaving your head or whatever. Yeah. A lot of things happened as a result of the way the school was run, and a lot of the therapeutic tactics used, like isolation, grooming, gaslighting, forced behaviors. There was just so much dominating behavior on the hands of the people who were taking care of the students. And it was very, I guess you could say it was cult-like, but it wasn't to the extent of, physically hitting or spitting on kids. I know that a lot of programs actually did that, which blows my mind, but it's just crazy because one of my friends was actually molested by another student, and the man who owned our school never reported it to the police.
Oh gosh.
And then we had a few teachers come in who mysteriously ended up not working there anymore, but they were partaking in behaviors with students that were inappropriate.
Oh my goodness, that's awful.
There was things
that power dynamic again that you spoke about as well, because those people are supposed to be, at a level of trust and responsibility, and that is an example of taking advantage of a position that you are put in if you are going to use your status to exploit underage children.
Yeah, it's just honestly mind-blowing.
But I'm glad you mentioned the link between CEDU, because all of the people I've spoken to that have been involved in one CEDU program or another, they use this language with agreements and brothers and sisters and being on bands and and it's language that I'm familiar with now, but it all comes from CEDU. So when you were writing to me in your emails and you were explaining to me what some of these things meant, I was thinking, I'm sure when I was doing my research on CEDU that I did not read the Monarch School being a part of the CEDU family. So when you explained to me that it all came from a staff member who graduated there as a teenager, it all began to make sense. So that would be a staff member who believes he was truly reformed from the program, who took parts of it that he truly thinks worked for him and took them into the Monarch School and applied them. And the result is the same, that the large majority of people who have had these experiences would not agree that they were 100% beneficial in the way that he probably felt they were.
With Metro and the best deal in wireless, you can rule your day. Get 2 lines with 5G access included for just $35 a month per line, period. With taxes and regulatory fees included every month. All on America's largest 5G network at no extra charge. Metro by T-Mobile, empowering you to rule your day. Requires autopay. First month is $40 per line for 2 lines. 5G access requires capable device. Coverage not available in some areas. See metrobystmobile.com or store for details.
Who are you texting?
My therapist.
You text with your therapist?
Text, video chat, call. Yep.
That sounds too easy. How did you find her?
I just went to betterhelp.com/save. She's a licensed therapist and it's all online. I connect when it's convenient for me and don't waste time driving anywhere. Plus, it's affordable.
I wonder if I should try it.
It's great to talk to someone in confidence. She's helped me sort out quite a few things. And right now you save 10% off the first month when you go through betterhelp.com/save.
betterhelp.com/save. Got it.
I think that it's hard to speak about his frame of view because, first of all, I think I should kind of explain Monarch a little bit, because the man who owned Monarch, I barely saw him, honestly. I saw him a few times while I was there. His name was Patrick McKenna, and his wife's name was Michelle McKenna. And they're both responsible for everything that happened there. And I think they changed their last name So I think his last name was Stambusky before. So it was Patrick Stambusky and Michelle Rothschild, and then they changed their last name to McKenna. So Patrick was the one who left Rocky Mountain Academy, which was a CEDU school. And then I don't know much about Monarch history because it was all by word of mouth. I don't know the absolute facts on that, but the way that Patrick and Michelle would kind of groom us to represent the school, they would treat the kids whenever they would choose the kids that they liked, that they felt were worthy. And they would kind of, bring them on their boat or bring them to their house and have us like eat snacks with them. And, they would treat us like we were special. And then they would turn around and ask us to take, parents, like visitors who would come to the school, like they'd ask us to, give testament to how great Monarch was and, kind of just give them tours and be a poster child for what Monarch had to offer their kids. And it's kind of sickening to me, actually.
You said that in terms of the cult-like levels of control that were used in places like Synanon, that there's no physical violence that you could recall from your time at the Monarch School, and that's why it's maybe not the same as some cults. But even in the way you've just explained, that level of manipulation of taking the kids out on special trips and then encouraging them to do things on behalf of Patrick and Michelle themselves, that is brainwashing and indoctrination on so many different levels. That's the us versus them, because you've already got the us versus them between you and the staff, and then you against each other, and now you've got this almost elitist group within the Monarch School who are favorites of the people in charge, the people with the power, the people that make all the decisions. And then you're creating another subgroup of us versus them, because then it's all the elitists who are in favor with the leaders against all the other regular attendees of the school.
It was a very small school too. So you had to like be consistent in being the way that they wanted in order to kind of remain like a favorite, I guess.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, once you reach the higher levels, like the higher steps in the program, it was a 5-step program. So once you reach level 4 and 5, you had to do exactly what they said if you wanted to graduate. If you wanted to leave, you had to basically, be a snitch, be poster children. Literally, you had to be down to what type of shirt that you wore every day, whether it was a collared shirt, non-collared shirt, whether you were on time, like literally every single thing that you did, you had to be perfect. It was utterly exhausting.
Yeah, it sounds it. And it sounds like a mile away from formal education and therapy.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, once someone told me I was smiling too much and I was being inauthentic. And another time someone was like, oh, you cried, like you're not doing your work. Like it was down to like even how you expressed your emotions. You had to be very, very careful. And it
sounds like if one of the staff have had a bad day, they're going to just take it out on any old resident they can find who's maybe eaten their food too quickly or has done their hair differently for the day, and that's what's gonna get them told off. It's like it sounds exhausting, like you're just constantly treading on eggshells just all the time.
Oh yeah,
can't imagine having to live like that.
I think that was one part, but also having no autonomy over your own life, it wears you down. That's the part that had me so angry all the time. I mean, I just had this like pent up frustration of I literally just want to sleep in a room without someone watching me or have 5 minutes to myself. Sometimes I would break the rules and I would go sit outside the lodge and just look at the mountains because I just needed like to breathe in my own space. And some of the staff, like, they had favoritism. So sometimes someone would be like, okay, if you stay right here, then I can like pretend I didn't see you. Like, the staff, they had moments of kindness. They weren't awful people. And I truly believe some of them really cared about us.
Mm-hmm.
But, Patrick and Michelle are the ones who tell them what to do. So it's tricky for them as well.
And do you ever recall a time where Patrick and Michelle asked anything of you specifically?
The thing is, they didn't really ask. I mean, I think that they knew I was a wild card because I was very vocal about, the things that happened. I was very expressive. I was very emotional. I was always kind of just myself, and to the extent that I could be. And I think they knew that I wasn't going to be as compliant as maybe one of my other friends. One of my other male friends, he was perfect, and he would be down to a T, like always dressed right.
Mm-hmm.
He was the true poster child of Monarch, and he just told me that like he would be assigned to a table for lunch to sit with the parents. And I've only had to do that twice, like 2 or 3 times, but he did it every time the parents came. So they didn't really ask. They kind of just like made you do it. And it was supposed to be like an honor. You kind of felt like, oh, like I'm a favorite. So you were like picked. And I know that I wasn't always picked because sometimes I would have good days and bad days. Like I was very moody. So, but.
And do you remember your graduation ceremony?
Yeah, I do. So I was supposed to graduate high school May of 2000. Sorry. I was supposed to graduate high school in May of 2016, but because of my seat, like when I was on punishment and, I couldn't go to class and I had to work and all that, I was pushed back to the next one. So I finished high school and the therapeutic program in August of 2016. And it was basically my dad came and my therapist, who had actually left the school a few months earlier, he came and spoke about me at my graduation, and I kind of said a few words, and I guess that was that. I don't really remember.
And did you have to receive any type of formal education after you left?
I actually went into college 2 weeks after.
Okay, cool. Because I know some people who have left these programs have had to actually go back to school to get their certification and proof of education, which they didn't get through their therapeutic school
I have
program.
a copy of my transcript, though. I mean, I was lucky. I got a copy of my transcript, and I got the diploma-looking thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know what other people are dealing with now with that, but I was lucky. I was able to get a copy of that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what did you go on to study at college?
Psychology.
Ooh, that's an interesting turn of events, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I know. I graduated in May actually, so I'm like,
congratulations!
Thank you.
That's amazing. So now you've got a degree in psychology.
Yeah.
Maybe do you think that's played a part in how you're able to work through all of your experiences and to be in such a positive place?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm just a really huge advocate for, understanding that mental health, it's not hard science, it's a soft science, and it's really subjective. So you really need to understand, what a person's going through, and you have to kind of be empathetic, and you have to have the hard conversations. You have to talk about mental illness because I think that almost everyone in this world has, even if it's just seasonal depression, everyone's going to face something with their mental health, and it's just really important.
Yeah, I completely agree. And especially with it being subjective, I think there's not, just the term depression, it's not one shoe fits all, is it? It's so specific to the person. Like you said, it could be seasonal. It could just be your diet. It could be something extremely complex. Every single person and every case of each mental health difficulty is so different. And I find it fascinating that you studied psychology and that you're able to be in such a good place now. Did you find that during some of your modules or assignments, some of them were particularly difficult for you because you would find yourself you would be putting yourself in the case studies of some of the things you were learning about?
I actually found it, I know this is strange, but I found it kind of reassuring because as I was learning about, the different things that came with certain mental illnesses, my favorite part of psychology, my senior year, junior and senior year, I got really into trauma work. So like into PTSD and, all the different things that happen in your brain and everything that comes with, experiencing trauma. Like that's something that completely just hit home for me because, learning about mental illnesses is one thing, but learning about trauma, like whether it's, small t or big T, it's like that can change your brain physically. And that just like was very reassuring for me to know that, everything that has happened to me at Monarch is not my fault, and everything that has happened afterwards, all the effects and experiences that I've had, it's not all on me.
And that's the most important thing. And I think that's the most difficult thing, because the conversations that I seem to have with others almost go in a full circle, where it's like, I had to be sent to this place because that my parents had no other choice and they didn't know what to do with me. But then all of these things that happened to me whilst I was there, I must have brought on myself because I was out of agreement, and or I wore the wrong type of t-shirt. So, or in group therapy sessions, it was me who got targeted for something I said or did or looked at a person in a certain way. And then they get back to this place in the circle where they're like, well, I brought all that on myself. And it's almost like trying to have it's well, I suppose it's just that person gaslighting themselves in a way, where they're told you'll never succeed in life if you don't graduate from this program. You won't graduate from this program if you keep falling out of agreement, or or receiving all of these punishments, or doing all of these things wrong. You're never going to succeed in life if you can't do this one small program. And if you're fed all of those things, they must stay with you. And all of the things that you're told over and over again in these sessions, and even in 10, 20, 30 years time, I imagine there's people that still have moments where they blame themselves for the things that are happening. And it must be like having to rewire your entire brain to stop yourself from doing that.
It's crazy. And I think education is literally the key to solving everything, because the minute that you are educated, you can understand why things happen.
Yes, like the kleptomania we were talking about, if you would explain to students what the condition is, then maybe that person wouldn't, get called on in sessions or get reprimanded so much for the actions that they were, carrying out.
But also that I think that a lot of people in the older generation right now, no one talked to them about what mental illness was. So when their kid is acting out, it's the kid's fault. It's on the kid. And that kid is going to be shamed for their behavior and believe that about themselves growing up. And the minute you can change the conversation from, your behavior is shameful to, oh, this person has really bad depression, or this person is, suffering from, I don't know, anxiety, OCD, something bipolar, the minute you can make that more normalized and educate people on that conversation, the whole dynamic is going to shift from, shaming people to understanding and being more empathetic. And that whole dynamic is going to change future generations if we can start having those conversations and start understanding each other on that level.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's so many posts I see on social media of parent shaming as well, where a child with autism may be having a difficult time in the supermarket for, the radio is loud, or there's too many people around, or the lights are too bright, or whatever could be the trigger. And then the parents are almost being blamed for not knowing how to, like, quote, handle the child. Or the parents are being blamed for the child having behaviors where they act out. And I think that in itself, becomes under the same topic of what you were just talking about, of there needing to be more education, more understanding, more empathy, more sympathy, just more education in general around all of these types of conditions that might separate somebody from a typical person.
Yeah, I feel that. I agree with you, because not everyone has access to the internet, and not everyone has access to education. And that's a whole nother conversation, but it's really just removing the stigma and being kind to each other. And the fact that so many people are coming forward and speaking about their experience in the troubled teen industry has got to be traumatic in itself for some people. I don't know what that's like for every single person, but it's also just providing people a space to feel united and, raise awareness, first of all. And that's education in itself. Just talking about what you went through, like, that's going to open people's eyes to a whole bunch of things.
Absolutely. And I think that anybody that will sit down and discuss such intimate and difficult situations, just to highlight the things that have happened and are still happening, is so commendable. I don't know how people do it. I think it's so brave. People that come and speak to me, I think it's brave. People that will just write on a forum or a blog or on Reddit or anywhere, any support network, just saying, this is the experience I had. I just think that's so incredible. And it's so amazing that it's happening. I just hope that there is some change that comes from all of these people speaking out, some kind of justice, some catharsis. I'm just hopeful for change of some type.
Yeah, I know a lot of politicians. I don't know which ones exactly, but I know that there are still people that profit off of the troubled teen industry.
Yeah.
Patrick actually, I don't know his connection with all that, but I know that when he closed down Monarch, he'd give very shady reasons why. He gave people 2 days to leave. And I know it's crazy because these parents had to find new places to send their kids.
Oh my goodness.
Staff had to find new jobs, and he just completely closed the school. And then turns out he was taking money from the school, and he's a criminal. He was stealing money, and he was actively and knowledgeably letting kids be abused. And it's happening everywhere. And the higher ups of the higher ups, are profiting off of it.
Yeah.
So until something changes there, until people actually get investigated and there's legal reform and people are like taking responsibility, nothing's going to change. No.
That what you've just said there, though, those steps, that's what we have to hope for in the next, the first steps is people talking about it and coming forward and saying, yes, these things happened. The next step is somebody passionate and in a position themselves, like you said, Paris Hilton's a celebrity, but she's not a politician. It's somebody taking this cause and saying, this is what I'm going to stick with, this is what I'm going to run with, and this is how we're going to make change. We can hold out hope because people are talking about it now, and people are bringing awareness to these things that have happened and are still happening. And so I feel confident that there will be change at some time. It just might take a lot longer, a a few more years. What year did the Monarch School officially close then?
I don't really know. I think it was my freshman year of college. I think it was like maybe 2017 or 2018. The whole situation was very hazy because Patrick erased his online presence and no one knew where he was or what was going on. And the Monarch website and their phone lines shut down completely. And they basically just tried to disappear and left these staff and students without really anywhere to go, kind of.
And was there no legal fallout from him stealing money from the company?
I see, that's the part I'm not 100% sure about, because I think some of the parents sued him, but I'm not 100% sure on
I hope so.
what went on there, because I literally just heard from word of mouth of other students that this was happening, and I have no idea, to be honest, because he literally erased he doesn't have a Wikipedia page. He's not on the internet. You can't find him on the internet. So he's gone, and he's a criminal, and it's just kind of baffles me.
Yeah, it's scary as well, because what's to stop him from becoming involved in another institution similar, if there's no record of the things that he's done, which is scary, especially because I know that in America all the states are different in terms of their laws and bylaws and things like that. It's over here, it's just sort of like the law, and then in America it's like, well, we do it differently in my state.
I totally forgot about
someone pumps your petrol for you in this state, but they don't do it in the state over, and weird things like that. So are you still in touch with anybody that you attended either of your programs with?
I am in touch with a handful of people from Monarch that I was in class with, and honestly, I feel like I'm bonded with them for the rest of my life, and I don't have to talk to them, every day, but they are the people who understand me to like my core. They've seen me in like my worst possible state, and we've all grown in and out of Monarch, and it's just they're kind of like my second family, and I love them very, very much. And some of them have been advocating for breaking code silence, and some of them are showing their love and support to the movement, and everyone's different with their healing process, but it's just, I feel like it's almost getting justice to have that space for them and to just hear them, reach out to me or each other. It's just kind of like reconnecting for a lot of people. And I love them so much. I don't know. I miss them dearly, and they'll always have a home with me.
Yeah. I mean, they say that there's bonding through trauma, which is sometimes the deepest level of bonding that you can have with another person. And it's not just that, is it? It's the again, going back to the being away from home and everything, and the isolation and being in the middle of nowhere and being with these people for over a year to 2 years, and then seeing your rawest self, your truest self in all manner of emotion, and it must be nice as well for you all to know that you have each other. Are there ever the occasional messages where someone's like, oh, do you remember when this happened?
Yes, all the time.
Yeah, I can imagine that's like, oh, I've just remembered this.
Yeah, like the crazy things that happened. They were like, do you remember when this crazy thing happened? I mean, it's like some of the stuff was bad, yeah, but it's also something you can look back and be like, wow, we went through that together, and
I suppose it's another reaffirming path for you to know that these things really happened as well, and know that they weren't your fault, and that you didn't make them up or exaggerate them, because you've got other people there that could say, oh my goodness, no, I remember that and it definitely happened.
Yeah, I think imposter syndrome is something that a lot of people struggle with, and it's like to be able to have someone tell you like, you're not crazy, like you didn't bring this upon yourself, like I was there, and it's kind of like, it's relief, and it's comfort, and I don't know, it's just, I don't know what else to say. I mean, we all just kind of support each other.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to see you're clearly very fond of them, and I'm sure that they feel the same way about you too. And it's nice that you're still in touch with them as well. So I've gone through all of my questions and asked all of my points. So I am going to offer it over to you and ask if there's anything you think we've missed or anything you would like to go over before we finish.
We talked about the spying and reporting other kids. We talked about gaslighting and like attack therapy a little bit. I think that something that we didn't really talk about was, we talked about the yellow notepad and like forced confessions.
Yeah.
But we didn't really talk about parents, like that kind of aspect of it. So the parents, they were kind of manipulated into, they were only provided information that was given to them by staff and the McKennas and our therapists, whatever. But every conversation that we had with them was monitored, and all the mail that we received, we didn't have, phones or anything. So our parents would like send us letters, and they would read those, and, they could throw them out if they wanted to or cross things out. But I mean, when we would go, if you reach a certain level in the program, you can go home for like a week or something, and we would have to sign a list of agreements saying that we wouldn't watch TV or wear out of agreement clothing, or ask the big one for me was, it said you can't talk to your parents about leaving. That was one that was in there as well. And my parents were like, oh, we can't talk about that. It was just kind of, because, the parents are told to trust the process.
Yeah,
so,
of course. Yeah.
Yeah. That was just something that blew my mind, is that the parents were also being manipulated and they didn't even know it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's like they're told that if they were to go against the agreements, that that what they're really in place for, to stop them from being found out for child abuse. But the parents are like, oh no, because all of the work that she's done over the last 2 years will come undone if we don't trust the agreements, and if we were to speak to her about coming home or what things really happen there.
Yeah, I mean, my parents think that I am alive because of Monarch. And, there's two aspects to that, because my therapist was incredible. He taught me so much, and he provided me a space on my one-on-one sessions to actually like talk about things and process things. And I did, learn things at Monarch. But the thing is, as a whole, Monarch was completely messed up, and, they did things that they shouldn't have. And I don't think that Monarch saved my life. I think I saved my life, and I survived, and I did what I had to do, and I grew as a person. But I don't think that was due to me attending Monarch. I think that's a skewed perspective from my parents.
It's quite a common one, I think, as well. And perhaps it's there in place of some suspected guilt, maybe. But they're taken away from the work that you did at Pacific Quest there as well. I feel like they don't know how you would have come home after just those 3 months of being enrolled in that program that really did benefit you.
Yeah. I mean, they liked Pacific Quest too. They think that it helps. I know that they were glad I went there. And I mean, I agree with them on that front. I definitely am glad I went there.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting that you have the ability to kind of differentiate your parents' beliefs between what you know to be true through the work that you've done for yourself, which must be empowering. And I think also very important that you take that credit for yourself as well.
I'm trying. It's a work in progress.
Do you know roughly how much your parents paid for you to attend the Monarch School?
I do not know. I've been told that, therapeutic programs are as expensive as college tuition, but I'm not 100% sure.
And there's always that sort of, we're keeping you on for a few extra months. Because
they did that for sure.
Because you're out of agreement all the time, so we're not going to let you graduate for another 3 or 4 months. And then I wonder how much it cost those families for the kids to stay on.
I mean, also another thing that we didn't talk about was the physical abuse that we experienced wasn't like, the other programs like Casa by the Sea or anything, but the only thing that they did on that front was they, like the bigger punishments. When I was on my seat, did I explain what seats were to you? I don't know.
No. You did mention the phrase, but you didn't explain what it meant.
Oh, okay. So a seat is one of the wooden benches in the lodge. You'd have like an assigned spot, and that was your seat, and you would sit there and you'd have to ask to get up, and you'd sit there all day really and just by yourself and, raise your hand, ask a staff member to go to the bathroom or something. But your therapist would like bring you some work to do in your seat notebook and stuff like that. When I was on my seat for the romantic relationship that I had, I was on bans from speaking to the entire school for 1 month. And then the next month I could talk to like specific people that was like approved and stuff. And I was pulled out of school and I worked outside. So like I did physical work, like labor, and I shoveled snow and like picked ice and stuff like that. And it was like 8 hours a day or something, but they have like work days. That's like a common punishment for students who break rules, is to have like a full day of work, like re-graveling paths or cutting down trees, or they used to make kids like dig up stumps, which is like hard. But
I interviewed he'll probably be listening to this episode as well, but I interviewed a lovely gent that I'm in regular contact with called Michael, and he was telling me all about the stump that he dug out, and it took a very long time. But that was it. That was in CEDU as well, so it's probably another one of those.
I mean, I don't think that Monarch was like isn't CEDU pretty intense? I don't know.
There's very similar characteristics. The differences I would say between your program and CEDU specifically, well, I mean, it's difficult because there's so many different CEDU schools in inverted commas, and wilderness programs, and each one was different. But CEDU was an umbrella. It did have a set of rules, or the way things ran. So we've spoken about the agreements, brothers, sisters, bands, those things that are CEDU lingo, but the big difference is that there wasn't really any formal education at CEDU, and from what I could gather, most people that graduated their emotional growth curriculum left with no formal education and then had to go and obtain formal education, or to this day still don't have any certifications, GEDs or anything. So there is that. Some people were there from the age of 12, some people were there from the at the age of 16, 17. It came straight from Synanon. It's basically Synanon for children. It paved the way for the troubled teen industry as it is today, and I think you can see that so obviously in the way that it influenced this Patrick guy to open the Monarch School and run it in basically the same way. The positive thing, I guess, is that you came out of it with your diploma, with your education, and you were able to say, I can go to college because here's my formal education. But that's not to say that the experiences that people had at the Monarch School were any less than those experienced by CEDU residents.
Yeah, it's hard to tell, but I just feel like Monarch wasn't, once I've heard other people's stories about CEDU and, all the different programs, it's like, I feel sometimes like Monarch wasn't as bad. And I know you can't compare traumas, you can't compare experiences, but sometimes I just feel like what I went through was minor, convinced to kids who were beat and made to eat their own throw up and put in solitary confinement and stuff like that. And we came nowhere near that. It's insane.
Yeah, it's, well, Dead Insane or in Jail, or is the name of the memoir, which is written by a gentleman named Zach Bonney, and that was his CEDU memoir.
Wow.
And that's a really interesting read. It kind of it paints the whole picture of him sort of leading up to going to CEDU, and then his parents dropping him off, and then it goes through his whole time there. So that's definitely an interesting read for people who want a deeper understanding of the CEDU schools specifically. But I'm releasing an episode which will come out a week before this episode around a program called Teen Challenge, which is still part of the troubled teen industry. And even though it's different to something like CEDU, there were still things that happened there, like took all the doors off the bathroom stalls so that nobody could have any privacy when they went to the toilet. And even though that's not severe in the way you just said, Monarch School was not as severe as CEDU, it's like, how depriving of a basic human right is that to just go to the toilet without being watched?
I mean, they would lock us in and out of the dorms at night. We couldn't be alone ever.
This is it. This is just like, you said you lose all the autonomy over just being your own independent human being. And these are just small examples of
even not being able to talk to someone for 2 months and sitting by myself all day and being shamed and repeatedly told that I was a bad person. That is so damaging. And I mean, so many people, it's not just me, so many people, and it gets worse. It's not even, that can't even encompass,
And they all take inspiration from the same handbook, So
and no one knows that though. The parents don't know that.
Exactly. Some of the techniques that are going to be used across these schools are going to be universal. So one good thing I did find out recently is that you can, I think maybe it was yourself sent me a link to reviews of the Monarch School. Or yeah. And I was reading them and I was like, oh my goodness. So that's a really good tool for parents to, if I ever felt the need to send my child somewhere for some type of rehabilitation or reform or something, if it really got to that place, really got that bad, I think having that tool of those reviews would be really helpful, because there's just so many 1-star reviews that say, do not send your child here because it's just an abusive it's just an abusive ranch out in the middle of nowhere. I couldn't believe some of that. I mean, listeners, if you want to go and have a look, there's definitely some interesting reviews.
We have
available.
We have a Facebook group, and literally it's insane, because people will be telling everyone writes down, someone will post something and someone will be like, oh, remember the time? And I mean, there would be kids there was this girl who said that she had braces and she never got them taken off, and she had a gum thing happen, and some kid broke his ankle and they didn't take him to the hospital, and then some kid had surgery and they wouldn't give him his pain medicine because he had a drug problem, and he got surgery and didn't have pain medicine. And it's crazy because some kids would be taken to the hospital for certain things, but they started like declining care. And I got a 2nd-degree burn on my chest when someone spilled like something really hot on me. It was like, I swear to God, it was over 100-degree water. Oof. And I got a 2nd-degree burn on my chest, and they wouldn't let me rinse off. And I basically sat in a soaked shirt and had my entire body was red. And I sat there with like, and now I have a scar from it. And literally no one took me to the hospital. No one provided me any care. They just told me like, just go to your dorm and like pat it down with cold water. And like, it was crazy. I was like, how can you do that? Like, that's a minor example, but I mean, there were people who like needed surgery and needed to go see a doctor, and they just weren't provided that. And we were an hour away from the nearest town.
Yeah, so
it's crazy.
As negligent at best, negligent at the very, very least. There's it's funny because all the reviews on this page, the 1-star reviews come from graduates, and the 5-star reviews come from parents. So wow. Leah says, 1 star, as a graduate of this miserable program, I would highly suggest that no parent puts their child through this abuse or any form of this abuse. So that's a former resident. But then Otto says, my son attended Monarch for the last year, and I am pleased with his evolution, 5 stars.
Oh, wow.
And then Lisa says, oh, no, this is a parent. She says 1 star. She says, my child did not attend, but in reviewing the boarding school, I spoke with over 40 schools, all of which answered their phones or called me back, and this one did not. Don't send your child here, says Richard. I attended for 6 months before I was finally pulled because of the emotional damage it caused me. So that's on yelp.com for any listeners that want to go and look up the Monarch School. There's a ton of reviews you can go and read that paint the place in a pretty damaging light from
there's not much on the internet about Monarch because the page was pulled, and I've just
seen that page 404 not found.
Yeah, they I feel like a lot of survivors from Monarch I think they're just exhausted. I think that they don't really want to talk about it. I can't speak for all of them, but I know that some people, some of the students that we knew either committed suicide, or I heard of 2 students that I knew that had committed suicide after they had left Monarch. And hearing that and being overwhelmed by the Breaking Code Silence movement, I think that some people from Monarch just don't want to think about it or talk about it because it's so traumatic. And
yeah, absolutely. And it's harrowing that those people felt that they had no other choice. And I know you've spoken about doing EMDR therapy, and I know that's not an option or a choice for everybody. I know that therapy is not something that is affordable or available for them in their situations, or wherever they are in their current living situations or location. So if you can attend some type of therapy, then it sounds as though it's definitely worth it. But for those who find themselves in a position where they can't, is there anything you would recommend they do for their own healing journeys?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question. It just depends on what access you have and what type of person you are. But I know that if you have an iPhone or an Android, there's a few apps. I know that there's BetterHelp. I think you have to pay for that one to get a therapist. But if you just look up the health section, there's a lot of different apps that you can use. I think one's called Anvelo or Marvel. I don't know. There's a few mental health apps that you can use. There's journaling apps that are free. There's meditation apps, and some of them are free, some of them aren't. And what I like to do, I just go on YouTube and I search up meditations, and those help a lot, especially if you're having a panic attack or something, or anxiety attack. Those can help a lot. it depends on what, self-care you like to do, but sometimes self-care isn't always, taking bubble baths. Sometimes the best that you can do is to just sit with yourself and breathe and, take a shower. Sometimes the best way you can help yourself is just taking care of yourself, feeding yourself. And sometimes that's enough,
Mm-hmm.
And I wish that therapy was affordable for everybody. I really do. But, there's so many great ways to cope with mental health. Just give it like a quick Google search too, like coping mechanisms for panic attacks or anxiety attacks or dissociation. I know that there are things like sometimes like sucking on ice cubes help when you're, zoning out or something. Like there's so many cool tips and tricks on the internet on how to cope with different things. So I highly suggest just go on Google or download an app. And I think that's the best way to say, because not everything's free in this world, but take advantage of what you got.
Yeah. I think that's great advice. About I like sometimes sleep hypnosis.
Me too. I love those.
Yeah, to get me to sleep. Sometimes that's really nice.
Yeah, for sure.
But anybody that wants support or is looking for more information, there's the breakingcodesilence.net website. There's the CEDU Legacy website, which has a ton of resources for for support and memoirs and papers that people have written and stories that people have told. So those are good. There's the Troubled Teens subreddit as well, which is really helpful. And you can always email myself, and there's lots of other people from the podcast that have come to chat with me that would be more than happy to speak to other members of the troubled teen industry as well. So there's lots of options for support, even if you feel like therapy is a million miles away from what you can take part in directly.
There's a lot of great groups too. I know that some of the up and coming groups, To Write Love on Her Arms or TWLOHA.com, they have a blog and education. And I guess, I don't know if this is worldwide or just in the United States, but there's RAINN, RAINN, for domestic violence and sexual assault kind of support services and education there as well. And the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI.org. That's also, a great source of information and support as well if you're looking into all of that. Those are a few. There's plenty more, but those are a start.
That's great. No, that's fantastic advice, especially because the majority of my listeners and interviewees are based in the States. Hopefully we can branch out. I did interview one gentleman from Wales who's just up the road from me, so that was a nice one. And that was the one interview where we had the most difficult internet connection, which I thought was hilarious, because interviewing people over in America seems to go so much smoother than him just a few miles away, which was hard work. So
I keep on forgetting that you're out of the country because our Wi-Fi's been up this whole time. So
it's 8:30 at night here. It's raining outside. It's really dark. Got my Christmas tree up just next to me here.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's nice and cozy over here. Right, so I've asked all my questions, and we've been through some support and advice for people. So if you think we've covered everything, I'm happy to leave it there.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really grateful for this opportunity to talk to you. I think your podcast is great, and I can't wait to hear the episode because this is my first podcast. So thank you so much.
Hey! So I'm going to say goodbye there, Charlotte, and just a massive thank you for coming and giving me your time and your expertise. Congratulations on your graduation. I'm excited to hear where you go next. And it sounds like you, if you wanted to be, you could be a huge advocate for the troubled teen industry and maybe even go on to work with people who are seeking help from the industry itself with your own expertise in education, Charlotte. I just think you're inspiring and in such a good place, and that's wonderful to hear. So just thank you so much for your time today.
Of course, this was amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored.
Enjoy the rest of your day, Charlotte. Thank you.
No problem. See you later.
That is the end of this week's episode. If you'd like more information or would like to show your support, then please visit the Breaking Code Silence website or use #BreakingCodeSilence to support the movement. If you'd like to get in touch, you can do so by emailing me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com or following me on Twitter and Instagram @cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, and this has been the Cult Vault.